There's one here. We're not going to be offended if you're walking around while we're talking. So let's jump right into the conversation. Shahid, you're the constitutional lawyer. Can you break down COINTELPRO for us? How exactly did it and does it continue to manifest in activist movement?
Thanks, Donna. There, in the history here, you saw the depiction of COINTELPRO 1.0. Folks can hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes. And then we'll talk a little bit about 2.0. 2.0 and its various facets. And one of the themes that I want you to draw away from this discussion is the sheer breadth of groups across our civil society that are impacted. You heard Emily Berman from the Brennan Center for Justice at NYU talk particularly about how in the first iteration of COINTELPRO, the targeted groups included not only civil rights organizations and leaders like Dr. King, but also the movement for Puerto Rican independence, the movement to end the war in Vietnam, the movement for equal rights for women, the movement for American liberation. In contemporary context, COINTELPRO 2.0, which I'll unpack some of the facets of in just a minute, the groups involved include certainly Muslims, who I suspect some of you heard about in terms of the particular abuses to which we've been subject, but it extends well beyond us. Environmentalists were targeted in the contemporary war on free speech even before 9/11. You can look at peace and justice activists around the country enduring these kinds of abuses. There's a pair of state legislators, Republicans from Rhode Island and Missouri, who raised concerns about the NDAA because DHS is like military service members and veterans returning from service in Iraq and Afghanistan as potential terror threats because of their attractiveness to militant networks on account of their military training. Supporters of Ron Paul have been tagged by the Missouri Information Analysis Center in a report in 2008, I believe, as potential terrorists. And so the sheer breadth of the groups point toward a harm that is greater than the sum of their parts, which is to say our democracy is being eroded under our feet again. And so let's talk a little bit about COINTELPRO 2.0. I want to just set the stage by broadening the context for about 30 seconds before I shrink it again. We are living in an era of a bipartisan assault on the rule of law, which at the moment in this country, I think it is a stretch to say we live in a free country, let alone the leader of the free world. And whether we look at that in the context of a regime of torture with impunity that rewards torture with power and prestige and a lifetime appointment to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals for Jay Bybee, alongside mass incarceration, imprisoning 2.3 million Americans for vastly less serious crimes, whether we look at this in the context of racial profiling in the war on drugs, national origin profiling in the war on immigration, religious or ideological profiling in the war on terror, whether we look at this in the context of executive secrecy promoted by an administration promising the most transparent administration ever while prosecuting more whistleblowers in the national security context than every other administration in U.S. history combined. Think about that for a second. Or whether we think about this in the context of the new and very terrifying authority to kill at whim and extrajudicial assassination, war by robot. There are some very terrifying things happening under our feet that are escaping the popular consciousness, and the surveillance regime is one piece of that vaster edifice. So let's dig in on that. Folks might recall total information awareness, just a show of hands from anyone who, right, you guys, okay, yeah, you guys are an important audience. This is great. All right, so Poindexter's proposing this, the panopticon essentially, and Congress defunds the program in 2003 only to see it reemerge piecemeal. And what's happened over the course of the last 10 years is the construction of total information awareness through smaller units that evade the same scrutiny to which that program was subjected. So we're going to talk a little bit about FISA and the NSA. We're going to talk a little bit about the FBI, both in the context of the Attorney General's guidelines and the abuses that the 2008 version enabled, as well as the Patriot Act and a whole litany of abuses under it. We'll talk briefly about fusion centers and joint terrorism task forces, and then I'll wrap up with state and local police, and then we'll have a chance in the rest of the discussion to hear about how these different policy prongs play out on the ground and how they impact different communities. So, FISA. The NSA's warrantless wiretapping scheme was developed in secret.
Wait, what's the NSA?
No such agency. Or the National Security Agency, depending on who you talk to. It is one of the most secretive parts of the federal bureaucracy. It is more secret and vaster than the CIA. It sort of makes the CIA look like a joke, quite frankly. And there's a fascinating story I'm sure you've all heard involving the White House counsel, Andrew Card, under the Bush administration administration racing the Deputy Attorney General up the steps of GW Hospital to reach John Ashcroft, who has emerged since then as the high watermark of civil liberties in this country over the last And you guys are laughing, and I think it's preposterous too, but it's actually true. Wow. I mean, Attorney General Holder is a nightmare on these issues, as in Mukasey was worse. So we were all familiar with that history that led to the NSA's program. Let's just briefly remind ourselves what FISA entails, not only the monitoring of every electronic communication, full stop, but also phone calls at least between the U.S. and any international source, plus some further zone of things which has never been elucidated in public. So none of us know the furthest contours of the NSA's warrantless wiretapping scheme. Members of Congress don't know. It's been struck down as unconstitutional by every federal judge ever to have evaluated the program on its merits, yet it persists because higher courts have always overturned those cases on appeal, particularly because, and you'll love this, the Catch-22, the plaintiffs can't establish that they've been surveilled. Why? Because it's all secret. So the secrecy has impeded and itself provided a justification and installation, if you will, for this very abusive and far-reaching surveillance act. If anybody is unfamiliar with the cases of Thomas Drake and William Binney, I invite you to explore those. It's a great articles on each of them, and the Wired magazine cover story on the new NSA data center in Utah is also worth reading from a couple months ago. Let's pivot off the NSA and we'll talk about the FBI very briefly.